Welcome to the Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit, where articles come alive. You're listening to the audio version of our article. For the full text and an interactive experience, check out the link in the description below. Interact with any selection using our AI assistant to enhance your understanding. Let's explore.
Reality in discourse analysis. The concept of reality in discourse analysis is complex and multifaceted, encompassing various perspectives on how reality is understood, constructed, and represented through language. While many discourse analysts emphasize the socially constructed nature of reality, others acknowledge the existence of a more fixed or objective reality that interacts with our linguistic and social constructions. This nuanced approach considers both poles. The idea that reality can be both shaped by discourse and exist independently of it. 1. Key perspectives on reality in discourse analysis. Social construction of reality. One prominent view in discourse analysis, influenced by post-structuralism and the work of thinkers like Michel Foucault, is that reality is largely constructed through discourse. According to this perspective, our understanding of the world is mediated by language, and what we consider to be real is shaped by the ways we talk about it. Constructed realities. This view posits that different social groups and cultures construct their realities based on specific discourses. For instance, the concept of mental health can vary greatly depending on the cultural and historical context in which it is discussed. Language as constitutive. Language is seen not just as a tool for describing reality but as constitutive of it. The words, metaphors, and narratives we use actively shape our perception of the world. Example: the notion of gender is understood differently across cultures and historical periods. In some societies, gender is seen as a binary concept linked to biological sex, while in others, it is understood as a more fluid and socially constructed category. These differing views of gender reflect the realities constructed through the dominant discourses in those societies. Recognition of an objective reality. While the social constructionist perspective is influential, not all discourse analysts fully reject the idea of an objective or fixed reality. Some argue that while our understanding and representation of reality are shaped by discourse, there is still an underlying reality that exists independently of how it is described. Interaction between discourse and reality. This perspective acknowledges that discourse plays a crucial role in shaping our understanding of reality, but it also suggests that there are material realities, such as physical objects, biological facts, or events, that exist outside of discourse. Empirical realities. In some fields, like the natural sciences or medicine, there is a stronger emphasis on the existence of empirical realities that can be observed and measured independently of discourse, even though our interpretation and understanding of these realities are influenced by language. Example: climate change is a phenomenon that exists independently of how it is discussed. However, the way climate change is framed in discourse, whether as a crisis, challenge, or hoax, influences public perception, policy decisions, and individual behavior. While the scientific reality of climate change is grounded in empirical data, its social and political realities are shaped by discourse. Framing and representation of reality. Framing is a key concept in discourse analysis that focuses on how language and discourse shape the way reality is perceived and understood. The idea is that the way information is presented, what is emphasized, omitted, or highlighted, affects how people interpret that information and construct their sense of reality. Selective framing. Different framings of the same issue can lead to different interpretations of reality. For example, framing a protest as a peaceful demonstration versus a violent riot constructs different realities for the same event. Impact on perception and action. The way reality is framed in discourse can influence how people respond to it, shaping public opinion, policy decisions, and social behavior. Example: the media's framing of economic inequality as a result of individual failings, e.g., lack of effort or education, versus systemic issues, e.g., structural racism or economic policies, can lead to very different understandings of the causes of inequality and the appropriate solutions. These framings shape the perceived reality of economic inequality and influence political and social responses. Reality and power. Power dynamics play a significant role in determining which versions of reality become dominant. Those in positions of power often control the production and dissemination of discourse, allowing them to shape what is accepted as real or true in a given society. Hegemonic realities. Dominant groups often impose their version of reality through control of discourse, shaping what is considered common sense or truth in a society. This can marginalize alternative perspectives or realities. Resistance and counter-discourses. Marginalized groups may develop counter-discourses that challenge the dominant construction of reality and offer alternative ways of understanding the world. Example: in colonial contexts, the colonizer's discourse often constructed the reality of the colonized as primitive or savage, justifying colonial rule. However, resistance movements have challenged these hegemonic realities by constructing counter-discourses that reclaim indigenous identities and histories, offering a different version of reality. Point 2. Examples of reality in discourse analysis. Example 1. Legal discourse and the construction of reality. In legal contexts, reality is often constructed through the language of the law. Legal discourse shapes how facts are interpreted, how laws are applied, and how justice is perceived. Example: in a trial, the reality of what happened is constructed through the competing narratives of the prosecution and defense. Each side uses language to frame the facts in a way that supports their case, constructing different realities that the judge or jury must evaluate. Example 2. Medical discourse and the interaction with biological reality. Medical discourse is an area where the interaction between discourse and objective reality is particularly evident. While medical knowledge is based on empirical research, the way diseases and treatments are discussed can shape both the patient's experience and public understanding. Example: the shift in medical discourse from describing obesity as a moral failing to understanding it as a chronic disease reflects changes in how the condition is perceived and treated. While obesity as a physical condition exists independently of discourse, the way it is framed influences how society understands and addresses it. Example 3. Political discourse and the framing of reality. Political discourse is a powerful tool for constructing social and political realities. Politicians and the media use language to frame issues, shape public opinion, and construct narratives that serve specific agendas. Example: the term war on drugs constructs a reality where drug use is framed as a criminal issue requiring military-style intervention, rather than a public health issue. This framing has significant implications for policy, law enforcement, and public attitudes toward drug use. Conclusion: the concept of reality in discourse analysis is multifaceted, encompassing both the social construction of reality through language and the recognition of an underlying objective reality that exists independently of discourse. While many discourse analysts emphasize the constructed nature of reality, others acknowledge the importance of considering how discourse interacts with empirical facts and material conditions. By examining how reality is framed, represented, and negotiated through discourse, analysts can gain a deeper understanding of how language shapes our perception of the world and the power dynamics that influence which versions of reality become dominant. This nuanced approach allows for a more comprehensive analysis that respects both the social and material dimensions of reality. Frequently asked questions. How is reality understood in discourse analysis? In discourse analysis, reality is seen as both socially constructed and, in some cases, objectively existing. This means that while much of what we understand as reality is shaped by language and discourse, there are also aspects of reality that exist independently of how we talk about them. This dual perspective allows for a nuanced understanding of how language interacts with the world. What does the social construction of reality mean in discourse analysis? The social construction of reality refers to the idea that our understanding of the world is mediated by language and that what we consider to be real is shaped by the discourses we use. Different social groups and cultures create their own realities through specific discourses, which influence how we perceive and interact with the world. Can you provide an example of how reality is socially constructed through discourse? An example of social construction is the concept of gender. In some societies, gender is understood as a binary linked to biological sex, while in others, it is seen as a fluid and socially constructed category. These differing views of gender are the result of the dominant discourses in those societies, showing how language shapes our understanding of reality. How do discourse analysts reconcile the existence of an objective reality with the social constructionist view? Some discourse analysts acknowledge that while our understanding of reality is shaped by discourse, there is still an underlying objective reality that exists independently. For example, while climate change is a scientifically observable phenomenon, the way it is discussed, as a crisis or a hoax, shapes public perception and action. This perspective recognizes the interaction between discourse and material realities. What is the role of framing in shaping our perception of reality? Framing refers to the way information is presented in discourse, which affects how people interpret and understand reality. The emphasis, omission, or highlighting of certain aspects in discourse can lead to different interpretations of the same issue, influencing public opinion, policy decisions, and social behavior. Can you give an example of how framing affects the perception of reality? In media discourse, economic inequality can be framed as a result of individual failings, e.g., lack of effort, or systemic issues, e.g., structural racism. These different framings shape the perceived reality of economic inequality and influence the types of solutions that are considered appropriate, reflecting how discourse can shape our understanding of complex issues. How does power influence the construction of reality in discourse? Power dynamics play a crucial role in determining which versions of reality become dominant. Those in positions of power often control the production and dissemination of discourse, shaping what is accepted as real or true in a society. This can marginalize alternative perspectives and realities, reinforcing the status quo. What are hegemonic realities, and how do they relate to discourse? Hegemonic realities are versions of reality that align with the dominant social norms and power structures. These realities are often imposed by powerful groups through control of discourse, making them appear as common sense or universally accepted truths. Marginalized groups may develop counter-discourses to challenge these dominant realities and offer alternative perspectives. Can you provide an example of how reality is constructed in legal discourse? In legal discourse, reality is often constructed through the language of the law. For example, in a trial, the prosecution and defense construct different versions of reality through their narratives. The way facts are framed and interpreted through legal language influences the judge's or jury's perception of what really happened, showing how legal discourse constructs reality. How does medical discourse interact with both social and objective realities? Medical discourse is an area where the interaction between social construction and objective reality is evident. While diseases and treatments are based on empirical research, the way they are discussed, e.g., obesity as a moral failing versus a chronic disease, shapes public understanding and treatment approaches. This shows how discourse can influence perceptions of objective realities. What is the significance of recognizing both social and material dimensions of reality in discourse analysis? Recognizing both social and material dimensions of reality allows discourse analysts to understand how language shapes our perception of the world while also acknowledging the existence of objective realities. This nuanced approach provides a more comprehensive analysis of how discourse interacts with the world, considering both the social constructions and the empirical facts that influence our understanding of reality. How do resistance and counter-discourses challenge dominant constructions of reality? Resistance and counter-discourses challenge dominant constructions of reality by offering alternative narratives and perspectives. These discourses, often developed by marginalized groups, seek to disrupt the hegemonic realities imposed by those in power and propose different ways of understanding the world. For example, indigenous movements may construct counter-discourses that challenge colonial narratives and reclaim indigenous identities and histories. Why is the study of reality in discourse analysis important? Studying reality in discourse analysis is important because it reveals how language shapes our understanding of the world, influences power dynamics, and impacts social behavior. By analyzing how reality is constructed, framed, and contested in discourse, analysts can uncover the deeper forces at play in communication and gain insights into how societies function and evolve.